Today's episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast is brought to you by Poor Richard's Cafe and Star Local Media. Poor Richard's Cafe, Plano's oldest restaurant since 1973. They are open daily from 5:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., serving the three most important meals of the day: breakfast, lunch, and dessert. It is true Texas home-style cooking made with love and grit. That is Poor Richard's Cafe, located off of Avenue K in Plano. Welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch, being joined by Justin Thomas and Brian Murphy. Gentlemen, we are halfway through our spring football Roundups series, so let's keep on rolling. Let's stick over in Class 5A, and let's talk some District 5A Division 1, the big school Frisco district. This is the district that contains, 6 Frisco schools: Centennial, Heritage, Independence, Liberty, Lone Star, and Wakeland, plus Little Elm and the Colony, in a district that, we're, granted, what is today? It's June 5th. We still have, almost, 3 months or so before the season begins. And it feels like we already kind of have an idea as to what this district is going to boil down to. You never want to put the cart before the horse, so to speak, but just given the results from last year and given how these two teams are, the positions that they're in heading into the season, this feels like a district that'll once again boil down to the Colony and Frisco Lone Star. So it was the Colony that got the upper hand last year in a game that was had one of the most thrilling finishes of any, maybe in the state. Mm-hmm. So right now
with that championship game,
the rematch. I already looked up the rematch. It's going to be October 18th at Tommy Briggs Stadium in the Colony. Definitely one of the marquee matchups as far as our local high school football slate goes. So let's start with those district champion Cougars.
You get to see where the end zone is if there's a crazy finish this time.
That was the worst part about it. That was the only bad part about that game, is the hash marks and the yard markers were not visible at all.
I was probably having to go like Forrest Gump and just keep running. Let's stick with the Colony, Justin, and talk about the Cougars right now. How are they shaping up at this juncture of the offseason?
Well, they look pretty good from my perspective. Mm-hmm. They're going for their 7th playoff berth in a row. As you said, they won the district title last year outright. They actually won it 2 years ago also when they shared it with Prosper. Mm-hmm. Talking to Coach Rangel this offseason, they kind of had two main objectives for this team. That was solidifying the offensive line, and then they had to find 2 new starters at safety. Actually, 3 new starters, because they had 2 all-district guys graduate, and then they have another one that they moved to linebacker. So those are the 2 kind of big things for them, are to solidify the line and find some guys in the back end there. This offense, if that line can come along, should be pretty stacked. Cameron Thomas is the lone returner on the offensive line. He'll be a junior, but Coach Rangel had good things to say about a couple sophomore guys that will be sophomores next year, Christian Cummings and and Henry Keeler. So he kind of likes what he's seeing and how the line kind of gelled. He said, over spring, the 18 practices or whatever, they really got better, and they really showed pretty well in that last week. He was really pleased with how they finished their camp this spring. If that line comes together, this offense could be one of the best ones in the state. They have Mikey Harrington. He's back for his 3rd year starting. Mm-hmm. He's already thrown for 5,500 yards over the last 2 years. And then when you look at their skill players, there's not many teams in any classification in the state can rival what they have. They lost, their workhorse Jaden Abdallah, mm-hmm. but Wade Simmons is going to be the heir apparent there. Colony always seems to have somebody ready to go in their backfield. Last year he only had 8 carries, but he produced 113 yards and 2 touchdowns on those 8 carries.
That's crazy.
He's a very quick guy, pretty elusive, so I think he's going to be a good fit back there for them. And then they might have the best set of receivers in the whole state. When you look at, they have a big physical possession guy, Keith Miller. He's committed to Kansas. He has mid-20 offers. Miles Price, our Star Local Media MVP last year, coming off his last year, just to reiterate, 2,000 all-purpose yards, 28 touchdowns, scored touchdowns in 5 different ways. 1 passing, rushing, receiving, kickoff, and punt return. Maybe he'll mix in an interception return this year and get 6 different ways, because he's a pretty good defensive back as well.
And then 1 on the hook and ladder too.
Yeah, so 1 on the hook and ladder. He's got up in the 30s offers, including some big ones recently like Ole Miss, and then you have Christian Gonzalez, who had 24 catches for 354 yards and 3 touchdowns last year. He's the real kind of speed guy. So you have the physical guy, the speed guy, and the do-it-all guy like Miles. They'll work him on the jet sweeps and stuff like that. it's going to be a pretty high-powered offense, and if the line comes together, look out. They could be one of the best units in the whole state.
That works so well in conjunction with a program like Lone Star, which has been so revered for producing just elite defenses over the years.
I don't want to sell the Colony's defense short either,
for sure.
because when you look at, talk about those guys as receivers, Miles and Christian might even be better in defensive back. That's where Christian's getting recruited. He's over 30 offers. Alabama, Ohio State, Florida recently, so he's racking up huge offers. So tough to find a better set of corners. They returned their entire defensive line. Marcus Moore, he's got over 16 offers up front. Don Puentes was the first teamer last year. He's back. Stephen McCollum was a second teamer last year. He's back. Kyrie Warren's back. And Coach Rangel was also pretty excited about a couple linebackers, Chris Allen and then Jose Escobedo, who is shifting from safety to linebacker. Darren Beasley seems like he's having a good offseason at safety, so I think it's going to be a pretty good defense too. And Lone Star is going to have to crank it up to down them, keep them from repeating, I think, because they look pretty loaded.
Can they do that, Brian?
Lone Star, not only have they cranked it up this offseason, their defense is going to be even better than what it was last year. That same defense that held Highland Park to 10 points.
That is such a high bar, though.
It is, but they returned 7 guys. The main 2 names that they graduated were Savashi Smith on the defensive line and Trey Taylor, who's going to Air Force. They returned their entire linebacking core from last year. We know one thing about Lone Star defense: they love having big time linebackers. Nick Bolton, Noah Velser, a couple guys to mention, but you have the defensive MVP. He's back for his senior year. Jalen Ford, he's been getting a bunch of big-time D1 offers. And then you bring back Rosillo and Blake Goder. That crew was all together last year. And then Torrin Pittman, who is an outside linebacker. He's 6'4", 190. They're going to use him this year as like a strong safety, outside linebacker combo mix. You return Noah Bolton, the younger brother of Nick Bolton, that cornerback. He's not as big as Nick Bolton, so that's why he's at corner, but he's a phenomenal athlete. And then you return the co-defensive lineman of the year in Dylan Harris up front there, and they return a bunch of other guys on the defensive front. That defense is stacked, and I haven't even gotten to the offense. I know you talked about those star-studded names. You Miles Price and Christian Gonzalez, Keith Miller, who I saw literally made a Sports Center top 10 catch inside the Star against Reedy in week 3 last year. But Lone Star might have the best receiver in the district in Marvin Mims. He's gotten offers from those same schools: Ohio State, Oklahoma. The list is on and endless. They have a guy who's going to take over at running back this year, who they're really high on. Rayburn was praising him a whole bunch, and Jake Brogdon. They call him the Swiss Army knife. He said he's going to thrive in that role. Last year they kind of used a bunch of guys at running back with Darren Smith in and out of the lineup and whatnot, and they returned 3 of their offensive linemen from last year. And they have the guy, before I mention this guy's name, they also got McKinney Boyd's starting running back, Jaden Nixon.
Okay.
So he's now also at Lone Star. I'm not sure where he'll fit in or how they'll use him there. And then they also had the guy named Trace Bruckler, big 6'2" receiver, who Rayburn is expecting big things from. He was on JV a little bit last year because he got hurt, and they tried to get him in the flow of things in varsity, and it just wasn't working out. But he's locked and loaded for next season. I haven't even mentioned the quarterback situation at Lone Star. Their word on the street is there is a QB battle right now, because that's a good thing to have. They have plenty of serviceable guys, even though they get a transfer from Tomball and Chandler Galban, who's he was just at Nevada the other day visiting, and he's gotten a bunch of other D1 offers as well. He's been a 2-year starter. He's has a QB competition between him and Garrett Rangel right now, who's the starting quarterback on the JV last year. My personal opinion, you expect Galban to win that battle there, and he's shown what he can do at the varsity level, at a high level as well. He fits that mold, that Jason Shelley / MJ Rivers mold. He runs a 4.6 40. He's not just a pocket presence. He's what you want, what Lone Star wants, what Rayburn wants in that offense. And I think, that game last year between Lone Star and the Colony was really good. I think it could be even more evenly matched this time around.
October 18th, 7 o'clock.
Have some kind of bet to who gets to cover that one or something.
Let's just both go out there.
October 18th, 7 o'clock, Tommy Briggs Stadium in the Colony. Mark it down, circle it in red ink. If Lone Star and the Colony are half as good as I'm being led to believe right now on this podcast, that matchup should be pretty salty for potential district bragging rights. So we go then from two teams that are initially at least expected to vie for the district title to a team that finished on the opposite end of the spectrum last year in district play, but had some pretty compelling news break, at least within the past week. Frisco Liberty, Brian, talk a little bit about this. Is Frisco Liberty, the Redhawks, undergoing a bit of an abrupt change within the coaching ranks?
Yeah, so Chris Birch, he's been there for the last 5 years, led the Redhawks to a 12-40 overall record. He took over the team in 2014. They were in a rebuilding mode. Jay Ajayi had just graduated a couple years before. They were still trying to kind of bounce back from those playoff years from the early 2000s. So he inherited a bit of a rough test. And, when you're playing in the same district against the likes of Lone Star and Wakeland, and for a little bit was the Colony, and now they rejoined. It's tough. Frisco had really good teams a few years ago as well. So it's nothing against that Liberty program. They're just in a really tough district. But yeah, Birch, he was offered and accepted an assistant athletic director position within Frisco ISD. Not a position, no one got fired, no one left, nothing like that. They're just adding another one, since there's so many schools, so many things going on in Frisco ISD. So they felt, Coach K and those guys in the office felt, we could use another position there. And Chris Birch was the guy pending a board approval June 10th, which will be this Monday. So nothing is official yet, but it's on its way. And there's no telling who his replacement will be. Liberty's coming off an 0-10 season. Who knows what to expect with the Redhawks?
Because it's a case where, just the timing of this is weird because they've already wrapped up spring workouts.
Yeah.
So
you got to think it'd be internal.
I'm not sure how many coaches are still out there looking for work as far as a head coaching position goes. But because this is a program, Liberty, they did go through spring practices and whatnot, so they can't start fall practices until August 12th. So that only gives them just a few weeks to prepare for their season opener. And you wonder if they promote from within, just because it would be someone who'd theoretically have some familiarity with the program and the kind of stuff that they run. Because if you bring in an outsider, you're having to basically teach these kids an entirely different brand of football, potentially at least.
Just a couple months before the start of the season.
It's very, very odd dynamic. You don't see too many coaching changes coming at this juncture of the year. So it was very, very fascinating when that came down last week regarding Liberty.
Yeah, it'll be something interesting to monitor, the rest of this month, because you got to think they'll move quickly in finding his replacement. So we'll see in the coming weeks what they do there.
Let's see. Let's look elsewhere in this district, Brian. Little Elm. What do you make of the Lobos right now, and what is at least the initial forecast as of June 5th on what the Lobos are cooking right now in their a potential bounce back season?
So, as we know, the Lobos didn't make the playoffs last year. They had their struggles on the offensive end. Their defense was pretty stacked last year. It was almost up to par, with the likes of the Colony and Lone Star, I should say. They just struggled at the QB position. Not even gonna, tiptoe around that. Everyone knows that's where the struggles were. They were able to run the ball really well. They had the offensive line. They had guys like Will Harrison, Brandon Crossley. Well, those guys are gone, but they have a man. They have the guy at the quarterback position who got thrown into the fire last year as a freshman down the home stretch in the second half of district play, and John Mateer. He's a sophomore. He's grown a little bit. His arm strength, they say, is nice. They've known about him since he was in 7th grade. And so, there's no QB battle at Little Elm this year. Jordan Hall, running back, he returns. He's going to be the bell cow of this team. And as we know, Brandon Crossley, he's graduating, going to Colorado State. But they have Oklahoma commit Ryan Watts, who's emerged almost out of nowhere, since January with over 20 offers since the beginning of the calendar year. And Coach Kendrick Brown, he expects to use Ryan Watts in a bit of the same capacity as they used Crossley, because teams weren't really throwing to Crossley last year, and he's so fast, so athletic, so dynamic, so they're using him in certain packages on offense. So, he's a firm believer in, if you have a player that's that talented, a guy like Miles Price who can play both sides of the ball, use him. I'm not saying Ryan Watts is Miles Price. Ryan Watts is a different build. He's a 6'3" cornerback, but they definitely plan on using him at receiver in some form.
You wonder, just compared to a player like Crossley, how much more with Watts, like how many more things you can do with a player like that, just because of his size. It's so unique for that position.
And that's one thing that Brown was really adamant about. Crossley is not Watts, and Watts is not Crossley. Those are two very different players. They just bring different things to the table that one might not have. And Watts, I don't expect a lot of people to throw in Watts' direction this year, just out of respect and just, hey, he's going to be on his island. He's going to shut down that side of the field. We've come to terms with that, and so why not use him on offense quite a bit? And also, we're going to see a little bit of Chuck Igwu, the younger brother of Ike, who was on the basketball team a couple years ago on those 2 playoff runs with Devin Pullum and Javian Williams, and of course R.J. Hampton. 6'3", they're going to use him as a tight end / receiver. He might fill in that Will Harris role.
Tall family.
They are a very, very tall family. But yeah, no, Ike was like 6'6", and then Chuck, who's going to be a senior this year, he's 6'3", and so yeah, they're going to use him kind of in a hybrid tight end receiver role, like I said, about what Will Harris was last year. So that offense should be revamped because those were the struggles last year. Remember the 10-7 loss to Lone Star? If they had Logan Kohler, or if John Mateer was just a year older, they could have beaten Lone Star, honestly, because they had the defensive firepower with Crossley and Watts and a really good linebacking core. Most of the linebacking core returns this year. They also have Tyrese Poe on the defensive line. Could be a dark horse for not just defensive MVP, but a district MVP if he plays to his capabilities. That's some rumblings I'm hearing from the Little Elm camp. They were really high on Tyrese Poe coming into this season.
Little Elm was one of 4 teams that finished within 1 game of each other last year, and it was just an absolute logjam in the middle of that district.
It was heartbreaking losses to Wakeland and Centennial, and then the 3-point loss to Lone Star, and then they bounced back, and then they beat teams like Wakeland, and they win games that maybe they shouldn't have won, or they lose games that they shouldn't have lost, and it was just a couple points here and there. Little Elm could have been 7-3, 8-2.
Because you had 1 game separating 3rd place from 6th in that district. So once you got past that top tier of the Colony and Lone Star, not a whole lot separating those next 4 teams. So let's round this out, at least with talking at least a little bit about maybe one of those programs of note. I guess Frisco Independence. Brian, you're feeling pretty all right about what the Knights have in store coming up.
They had a great bounce back year last year. They had the run with Dom Williams, and then they missed the playoffs the next year, and then they came right back in 2018 behind Braylon Braxton. He's the engine that makes that team run. Big, physical, fast, dynamic quarterback. He's perfect if you want that RPO offense. I've heard he's even grown a couple more inches. He's lost a little bit of weight, and he's gotten even faster thanks to the track season. He was about 6'2" last year as a sophomore. He's a big guy, and he had some big moments. He's a hard man to bring down, and he can launch it, and if the pocket collapses or if nothing's open downfield, he can take off. And so he'll be a junior this year. So I don't expect, although they graduated Logan Brungart, who, top 3 player to come from that program, for sure, in my opinion. They lose him at running back. I still think they'll be just fine. It'll be running back by committee. One of those names, a name to look out for is Reggie Bush. Not the Reggie Bush, but there's a Reggie
story.
I'd be there right now. But yeah, no. So along with Zaire White and a freshman named Jackson Lavender, just a couple names to mention there. But they should be much improved. Elijah Arroyo barely played last year, will be a name to watch for at the wide receiver position. He's about 6'4", 205 or so. So that offense should be locked and loaded for another big season in 2019.
And that is a cursory look at some of the early offseason storylines developing in District 5-5A Division 1. We'll talk some 6A on the other side of a quick break. We'll go 11-6A, talk a little Mesquite ISD with Devin Hassan, and we will pick that up after a word from this sponsor. Today's podcast is brought to you by Star Local Media. 14 newspapers and websites with a print distribution of 270,000 homes and monthly page views of 600,000 online. Star Local Media, your community voice for news. And now, let's get back to the podcast. And we are back. We got Devin Hassan in to talk some District 11-6A, talk about, I guess, the 3 6A Mesquite ISD schools, Horn, North, and Mesquite High. We can start with, let's see, I was just looking over these, so it's within the past 3 years, all 3 of these schools have had now turnover at head coach.
Yeah.
Really odd how that's, I mean, you have these programs that were so tenured for so long at those positions, and now just in the blink of an eye, we got some new faces at all three of those schools within the past few years. So let's start with, I guess, the most tenured of those three head coaches, entering his third year with the program, and I guess the de facto city champs of Mesquite ISD last year, at least at the 6A level, that being the original Mesquite High School.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned turnover. It's not complete turnover because two of the programs hired from within, and the exception was Jeff Fleener out of Mesquite, who has deep Mesquite ISD ties with his father-in-law being Dennis Hard, a longtime trainer at North Mesquite. So he still has some familiarity. But Mesquite was kind of one of the nice stories, really, of the area last year. 2 years ago, in their first season, they go 1-9. Under Jeff Fleener, and as a former assistant at Allen, and has taken over a solid program at Brandeis down in San Antonio. Jeff Fleener is not usually going 1-9.
No, he's
at
not.
all. So they went an overhaul of their off-season program, and it paid dividends. They get up to 5-5 last season, make the playoffs for the first time since 2013. Just one of the huge turnarounds in the area. And they hit the weight room, hit the offseason with that same vigor, that same enthusiasm, and they're kind of expecting that to carry over once again. I'm not going to say they're going to make another 4 to 5 game turnaround, because that would obviously put them at 9-1, 10-0. And when you're in a district with the reigning state champions, Longview, and a perennial power playoff team anyway in Rockwall, that's going to be tough to do. But there's no reason to think that Mesquite can't continue to make strides now in the third season under that coaching staff. They have a returning quarterback in Dylan McGill, who started off in kind of a rotation platoon type deal last year, but as the season progressed, took a majority of the snaps. He's a dual threat kid, came along, his passing really progressed. He ended up throwing for 983 yards and 8 touchdowns, but really explosive on his feet. Rushed for 635 yards and 6 scores to really give him that dual threat, which when you have a back like Ladarius Turner in the backfield beside you, it gives you that 1-2 punch in the ground game that makes you really dangerous, because Ladarius Turner, you talk to pretty much any coach in that district, and they say he's the next breakout star. I mean, he rushed for 1,202 yards, 11 touchdowns last year. So it's not like he's an unknown. But in terms of when you talk about the big name running backs around the region, Ladarius Turner at Mesquite doesn't really pop up on that radar. Expect that to change if he has the kind of season they expect out of him. That they should be solid all the way around on offense. Jadarian Smith, KB Frazier were two guys who really kind of came on late in the year as McGill progressed as a passer. They started making plays outside at wide receiver. Telstra McDaniel, Seth Robinson, two guys to build around the offensive line. So, a Mesquite offense that was kind of trying to find its footing early on. Again, when you have a rotation at quarterback, it's so hard to develop that rhythm, develop that consistency. They really kind of got going mid-season, and they were solid. And again, defensively, Mesquite was one of the better defenses in the district last year. Now, they replaced 3 college-bound defensive linemen, and that's going to be tough, because that was really where Mesquite made their name last year, was in the trenches. But they have a guy named Jerrion Smith, who's back at defensive end. Jaden Brown was a first-team all-district linebacker at sophomore last year, made 114 tackles. So he's a big-time guy in the middle. And, by all accounts, they got Dwayne Adams is back in the secondary, but by all accounts, they have a lot of these playmakers, these younger guys that made plays as the season went on, that are back kind of ready to take on an expanded role. And, excitement's high. Mesquite had kind of fallen into a rut. Just when you're not winning, just that enthusiasm kind of gets fit. And sometimes it takes a coaching change. That's not an indictment on the past staff at all. Just sometimes it takes a breath of fresh air to get that program going, once again. And you kind of saw that last year under Mesquite, and expect them to be right there contending again for another playoff spot this year.
I just remember last year, going into one of their non-district games against Plano West in the third week of the season, and thinking where those two teams were the year before. Mesquite going 1-9, West going 0-10, thinking, oh man, this be a nice little coin flip game, a nice little litmus test to see where Plano West is at. And then Mesquite just goes out and just lays waste to them, 44-20. That, I guess, was the kind of the breakout game for McGill, if I recall, with him. And 5 touchdowns was it against Plano West?
Yes.
And just to see the strides that they had made in 1 year's time, the arrow definitely pointing up for the Skeeters under Coach Fleener. a program which, I mean, heading into last season, at least that you would have said, at least at the surface, was the odds-on favorite to be the best team out of Mesquite ISD, as they've been for several years, was Horn. Horn had, I mean, there's no possible way that next season can be any weirder than 2018 was for the Jaguars. They will have a new head coach, though. They were the last of the three 6A Mesquite ISD schools to make a change at head coach, with Mike Overton retiring, was it?
Yeah, Mike Overton retired.
Yeah. With Coach Overton retiring after his successful tenure with Horn, and his old defensive coordinator, Chris Hudler, getting promoted. So what is the read right now on the Jaguars under Coach Hudler?
Well, Chris Hudler has about as deep as Mesquite ties as you can have. I mean, he grew up going to elementary school, middle school in Mesquite ISD. He would have gone to Horn if Horn would have been open back when he was going into high school. It just so instead he goes to Mesquite and ends up being a key member of their 2001 state championship team. So he's got the deep roots in Mesquite. Went to play at Tech, and then came back to the district eventually when he got into coaching, and has been at Horn for several years, and obviously gets the promotion. They have some work to do in terms of replacing some key guys on offense, namely Jermaine Gibbons, their outstanding quarterback, who rewrote the record book. Davizia Gabriel did get some snaps last year because Gibbons was a little shaken up at times last year. They also may take a look at Braylon Monroe, who's an outstanding athlete who transferred from West Mesquite, who he got to look at quarterback. He can also play some wide receiver. He's a very good baseball player. He's a kid that hit 420 on the baseball team, so outstanding all-around athlete. Nikausi Emery returns for them. He can play running back. He rushed for 620 yards and 6 touchdowns. He's an outstanding wide receiver. He's an all-district kickoff returner and punt returner. Just does a little of everything. They're just going to find different ways to get the ball in his hands. Again, Cameron Jackson and Donovan Payne are established guys on the outside at wide receiver. Ben Wyatt, another guy who can play both running back and wide receiver. So whoever steps into that quarterback role is going to have plenty of options around him to distribute the ball, and I think with Diamante Williams and the offensive line should be a strength, and so I think this has a potential to be not the kind of explosive offense right away that we've seen under Chris Robinson and Jermaine Gibbons and some of those guys that Horn has had in the last few years, but certainly a prolific unit. Defensively, they had some losses to graduation and transfers we won't get into, but they should be. They're going to be good in the middle, in particular. Nick Garcia was the defensive newcomer of the year. Quavon Grant, each of those had over 125 tackles last season. Marquise Edwards is a sophomore. They expect to slide into another starting position. They got some holes in the secondary, but you were talking about there's no way they can have a season. Well, they play the same non-district
that's
slate,
what I was thinking.
And they have these same rotations early on with Longview and Rockwall, so it's not out of the realm that Horn gets off to another tough start against that heavyweight non-district schedule with your Allens and whatnot in the world.
They actually don't play Allen though to start the season. Allen plays Cedar Hill. They play John Tyler.
That's right.
At Rose Stadium.
They swapped that out.
Which is still it's not Allen, but it's not exactly a layup by any stretch. John Tyler went 4 rounds deep last year or something crazy like that.
Yeah, but so Horn, it's going to be there, and they do this every year. That's why you see during their streak of 11 consecutive playoff appearances, you'll see overall records that are 5-6, 6-5, and they kind of lent it. Well, no, because they always do this year in year out. Now, maybe not as big of a murderer's row as last year, but this is year in year out. This has been Horn's philosophy. Is we're going to test ourselves early, and it's just going to make us a better team for the stretch run. So, but again, we kind of alluded to Longview and Rockwell, and we'll talk about them later this summer. But it's a tough district. There's only 4 spots. So when you kind of pencil in the 2 of them almost on an annual basis, that only leaves 2 spots between 5 teams. And that's what Horn and Mesquite were able to do last year. They took care of business against the other teams in that district, and they were able to nab those final 2 spots.
Then you look at a program like North Mesquite, which won 3 games last year under first-year head coach Tim Seder. Kind of the reverse of how Horn went about its regular season, where North started off the year 3-1. Albeit not a murderer's row at least, but again, that's relative to where you are with your program. But then the strength of that district crept up on them, and they lost their final 5 games. So as they head into their second offseason under Coach Seder, what is the read on the Stallions right now and where they're at?
They're hoping to make that next round. They'd love a Mesquite type turnaround into where in year 2 under Tim Seder that they are able to contend for the playoffs, and they might very well could be. You mentioned the 3-1 start, and then the district kicked in. The difference I thought this year, just kind of talking with some of their coaches, is they need to get off to a similar start this year, but then build on that and establish some confidence, because it's so easy in this district, especially with some of these potent offenses, that you go out and play rock wall. And I'm talking about any team. It could happen to teams in the playoffs. You just play a team like rock wall, and all of a sudden you're down 28-0 in the first quarter. And you go, oh my gosh. And a lot of these guys, don't know how to handle it. They had a lot of younger guys. So we'll see how they do. They did graduate a good chunk of their production. Kamari Thompson, their quarterback, is back. He was kind of transitioned into the position as it went on. He ended up throwing for 597 yards. Good athlete. Ran for 328 yards and 3 touchdowns. Should be a lot better in his second year full time. Good kid, good athlete, smart kid. He's going to the Naval Academy. Excellent leader out there. He may also, they're in one of those positions right now, depth wise, where they're going to have a lot of guys go play both ways.
All right.
So he also spent some time at defensive back last season. So you also have a guy like Samuel Yang, who was an all-district defensive back, who's probably going to play some, possibly running back, possibly some wide receiver. Torian Smith, a wide receiver, one of their top targets on the outside, is also going to be a starter on defense. And so they're going to have a lot of guys like this that are going to be having to go 2 ways, at least early on, until they establish that depth. But, Marcus Yao was a sophomore wide receiver who, when I saw him, it seemed like every time I saw North Mesquite, he was making plays last year as a sophomore. He only had 7 catches. That surprised me, based on what I'd seen. 7 catches last year, but 4 of them went for touchdowns. So I guess I saw all his highlight film.
It's pretty efficient.
They're going to have to break in a new backfield. They should be, whoever's back there, LaMarcia Campbell, Terrence Hobbs, and Roman Reyna are all returning starters in the offensive line. Mm-hmm. So that gives them a good foundation there for whatever. And they've been able to find running backs. That's one thing, whether North Mesquite's been up like they were 3-4 years ago, or whether they've been down, they've always had an excellent pair of running backs. So even though there's going to be new faces down there, I think they can probably find somebody, especially with that offensive line, to take some of that pressure off Kamari Thompson, as he kind of gets his rhythm with his wide receivers. Defensively, they do have quite a few holes in the middle. Jalen DeLance and Davion Carter are excellent on the line. Jordan Colston's the one linebacker name that did jump out, that did some good things last year. But it's a work in progress. Again, I think right now and through the spring and seeing them out their spring game, it was just about developing some depth, building some confidence and taking that into August, where, they do have I'm not going to say a favorable, because you never know how some of these other teams that they played last year, or, what kind of progress they've made in the offseason. But I think they have a chance to build some confidence and build some momentum in the non-district play schedule. And then they open with Tyler Lee, and that's what you look at as one of those swing games, even though it's a district opener. When you look at, kind of that 5-team race for, those last 2 spots, in theory, then that's one of those swing games that number one could prove huge at the end of the season, and number two could use they could use as a springboard toward making a push of their own.
I know it's still incredibly early, but have you just heard anything through the grapevine? Is the initial word on this district that all roads are going to go through Longview once again? I know they got the quarterback returning and whatnot, and obviously the state championship pedigree to build off of. But
yeah, well, if you talk around circles around the state, all roads to the state lead through Longview, not just 11-6A. Okay. This is a Longview team that's contended year in, year out for the past 15 years under John King. And they finally, after so many close calls and heartbreakers, they finally broke through last year. And they graduated several players, obviously, but Haynes King is one of the top. Coach's son is one of the top-rated quarterbacks out. He's back, and they return several players. And again, a program that big and that deep. That's one of the things when you watch Longview is they're rotating guys, and even when they get out to a league, they're bringing their second, third teamers in. But they're still expanding that lead because there's not that big of a drop off between their starters and going back. So yeah, Longview's going to be right there in the mix. They're certainly the pre-district favorite, probably the pre-region favorite if you had to say at this time. So yeah, as far as 11-6A, what we're talking about today, all roads go through Longview.
And there's no scenario they would ever creep into that Division I bracket in 6A?
I would have to look at it to I'm pretty sure that that there's no way, because I know between Mesquite, it would have to be some combination, and again, I'd have to double check it, of I'm pretty sure they're 6th out of the 17. So I'm pretty sure there's no way they can go in there unless
something crazy happens.
Well, yeah, no. Even if Rockwall Heath were, there's no way they can make a Division I. No.
Okay. Well, there you go, and that is a look at some of the early storylines surfacing within Mesquite ISD as far as 11-6A goes. Devin, thanks for swinging by. Appreciate Justin Thomas and Brian Murphy for doing the same. This will close out the episode, and we will check back in on Monday with, I guess, the final 2 districts of our spring football series roundup and whatnot. So I guess what we have left, 4 5A Division I, some Carrollton Farmers Branch ISD, and then the big old heaping mamma jamma known as District 9-6A over in 6A, and that'll wrap it up for this episode, folks. Hey, you enjoy the rest of your week, and we will talk to y'all later.